Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our board chair check-in and update meeting. My name is Will Marie Newton, and I will be your moderator today. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself if you're not speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you have a webcam on, we welcome you to turn it on so we can make this more interactive. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under services. And I would like to introduce Patrice McCarthy.
Good morning, everyone, and it's great to see such a robust group this morning. A number of us, I mentioned earlier, have just come back from a very successful legislative forum held at the Capitol, sponsored by CREC, CABE, and the Hartford area superintendents. So it was a great opportunity to interact with some of you and some of those board chairs that are often on this call, as well as a number of legislators. Senate Chair of the Education Committee, Doug McCorry, was there for almost the entire length of the forum. So he offered remarks, but he also heard the concerns of those in the room, which was great. So this is our first week experimenting with a 2-session board chair check-in. We heard feedback that we know 11 a.m. is not the best time for everyone, and we respect that. So we're going to offer a second board chair check-in on a trial basis. It'll be next Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4, and you are all welcome to join that as well. But what we're really trying to do is accommodate those that can't necessarily be on the 11 a.m. Call. But we're going to see how this goes. We've got a great group here this morning. So it seems like at the moment, 11 o'clock is working well for a significant number of you. And I have to give a special welcome to Colleen, because she managed to get from the state capitol back to, I guess, her home in Southington in record time in order to be. I didn't think I'd see you on the call this morning, Colleen. You really
I wasn't driving.
Oh, good.
I was with my superintendent, and he's a good driver.
A speedy driver.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, and she'll just update you on a couple of upcoming opportunities for engagement.
Great. Thanks, Patrice, and good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all, and good to see some of you for the second time today. I just want to give you an idea of a few of the things going on in the next month or so, because I think there's some great opportunities that that may help you in the work that you're doing. So the first thing I want to do is kind of look backward for 1 second. Last week, we had a great webinar on the board's role in communications. Our speaker, Chris Horan of Horan Communications, is very familiar with the role of school committees, Massachusetts, and school boards. And he did a great job of being very clear about which lane, as our immediate past president, John Harris, refers to, board members should stay in, and which lane is that of staff. It is archived on our website, so if you didn't have the opportunity to participate last week, I really do encourage you to check it out. So that's one thing. But coming up next Thursday, we have a webinar at noontime that's going to be facilitated by Martha Brackeen Harris, who is a CABE consultant working with us on our DEI efforts. And it is a webinar on African American, Black, and Puerto Rican Hispanic course of studies. And we have a teacher and students from the Bridge Academy joining us. They spoke before the State Board of Education about their experience with that course. And we thought it was important to share that with board members. So that is coming up. Also next Thursday in the early evening, we have our book club discussion where we're going to be talking about The Innovator's Mindset by George Couros. He was a general session speaker at our convention back in 2019, I believe it was. So we're looking forward to a great conversation regarding that, and you can still register for that as well as the webinar earlier that day. This is I Support My Connecticut Public Schools Month, and we are doing what we can with videos that folks are sending to us. So I encourage you still have time to send us short videos of great things going on in your schools that we can share with an audience that's a bit different than yours, to really heighten the profile of the good things going on. Certainly reach out to me after this if you have questions. And then the last thing I want to mention is next month is Board Member Appreciation Month, and we will be doing our very best to share with all of you how much we appreciate the work that you do and working with school districts to do so as well. So a little ahead of time, it's not March 1st yet, but thank you for all the good work that you and your fellow board members do, and be watching our airwaves, so to speak, for some treats celebrating all of you. Patrice, I think that's it. I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Lisa. We suggested 2 topics for your discussion this morning, but obviously this is your time. So if there are other issues you want to raise, please feel free to do so. But advocacy and budgets, it's the season for both of those. In terms of advocacy, a couple of key dates and sources of information. We did do a webinar on the governor's budget earlier this week, and that is also archived on the CABE website. So if you want a 30-minute overview of what's in the governor's budget, feel free to access that. The Appropriations Committee hearing on the education portion of the governor's budget will be next Thursday, February 23rd. You can testify in person or by Zoom. And Leonard can attest to the fact that even if you draw number 81, if you're doing it by Zoom, at least you can be at your desk and do some of your day job while you're waiting to testify. Leonard actually testified at 6:30 last night, but at least he wasn't hanging around the Legislative Office building all day. But if you're interested in hanging around, please feel free to do that as well. Tony Berugini, the board chair in Cheshire, has actually offered to stay at the Capitol with anyone who is interested in testifying and just, sit there with them and observe the proceedings. If you don't have to do it every day for 12 hours a day, it is rather an interesting process. The CABE Day on the Hill on March 8th will be another opportunity for you to engage in advocacy, and that's free this year. We're going to center all the activities at the Legislative Office building. We are going to honor Senator Martin Looney for his efforts in the past legislative session to support additional funding for the Special Ed Excess Cost Grant, which remains a priority. And we just encourage you and your colleagues on your board to think about participating, as well as if you have student representatives on your Board of Education. It's a great civic engagement opportunity for them as well. We will be doing a webinar on the pending legislation a couple of days before Day on the Hill, so that you'll again have access to sort of the briefing materials before you actually get to the Legislative Office building. And that'll help us utilize your time most effectively, because the Education Committee is actually scheduled conveniently a public hearing that day. So you would have the opportunity to see the committee in person, in action, if you're able to be with us. So with that, I'm going to open it up to you. How are you engaging around advocacy? What can CABE do to support your advocacy efforts? Thoughts and suggestions?
I'll chime in, Patrice, if you can't see me on the screen.
Terrific. Thanks.
Sometimes I know you can't see everybody. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Jacobson, board chair for Fairfield. One thing I will highlight that is super helpful is when things come through a committee that isn't necessarily obvious. That's super helpful. So, as for me, I check the bulletin every day. I check things that sound like it might be education related, but as we know, it could be in public safety and security and you have no idea, right? It could be something off. So I find that really helpful and appreciate the fact that things are noted when it's not in, the ed committee or maybe the children's committee and things that seem a little bit more obvious. And as far as how I have been engaging is, I've testified on one item so far, kind of waiting for SB 1 to come out. in terms of language. Don't know what that's going to look like yet. But I testified on the free meal thing in children's free, not free meals for next year, not the remainder of this year, the one for next year, because that's a big nugget for us if they're not going to be covering 100% of that.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And what Jennifer is referring to is in advocacy highlights, we email you an update about bills in any of the committees that have an impact on public education. Sheila and I review all of the legislation because you're absolutely right. Impact on education can show up in new and different places. And in some cases, we as an association may not have a position on a particular provision, but we want to let you know about it so that if it does matter to you and your district, you have the opportunity to testify. And you're not responsible for reviewing every piece of legislation in every committee. So thanks, Jennifer.
Sure.
And the governor did sign the bill that provides for the free school meals through the end of this school year. He signed it right after we finished our webinar the other day on the governor's budget. Other advocacy thoughts. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm actually just kind of curious because based on the previous comments, one of the things we struggle here with the budget is energy increases. It's like what, 35–40% of our actual ask this year. And I'm wondering if, not specifically education, but are there other bills or other places where there may be help for school districts coming in that area?
Not that I have heard discussed at this point, but that's certainly something that we'll take a closer look at.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see anything yet, but I don't think we're alone in New London. I think our increase is $855,000 estimate. But we also have 2 new schools coming online, which we have no idea what the cost is going to be to heat and cool them. So it's a trial and error fun times. So, all right, that's my question.
We'll take a look.
Okay, great.
Brian, Patrice, if I may ask Brian a question.
Go ahead, John.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, John.
Are those new schools in line for net zero compliance at any time?
You know, John, I'm not 100% sure. One of the schools finishes in September of next year, and the other one finishes in May or whatever, or June the next year. So it's our struggle really is we don't even know what to predict. And we've asked our engineers to give us an estimate. And well, they kind of balk a little bit. But I can look into it. I'm not 100% sure on that, John. You know, to me, right now, it's just a number versus.
Yeah, I was talking more along the lines of what the governor and others have sort of directed energy users to do by 2040, if I'm not mistaken. And some districts we just actually did a net zero resolution so that our administration needs to look through a lens of zero fossil fuels, and I won't go on, but that kind of thing for the near future. But
I don't think that's come up yet.
Okay, thank you.
You have to build them first, John.
Other advocacy thoughts?
Patrice, it's Ruth Ann.
Ruth Ann and then David.
Okay, following up on those comments, on Tuesday, you had spoke about Senate Bill 961 that regarding the new construction in solar and things like that. And I believe Sheila was testifying or speaking before the committee yesterday.
Leonard, was that the one you testified on? Or we may have submitted written testimony on that one. That was the one that required a number of studies.
Yeah, I testified on that one in regards to the professional services, as well as it was running concurrently with the HVAC project. And we're looking to stagger with the HVAC project because there's just not enough professional services support in the state to support not just the HVAC running full course, but if you had 2 major projects running like that. So we're asking for the state to somehow put some money behind the actual state person to be responsible for that task, to manage that task with the authorities having jurisdiction in each of the towns, like a building official, to make sure that everything is running right. So That was our viewpoint on it from a CABE perspective.
Thank you.
And some of you may know that in his professional life, Leonard has some significant experience with those service providers. He works for Johnson Controls. So when he speaks on these issues, he speaks with authority. David and then Laurel.
Thank you. One of the luxuries I think Leonard and I have in Windsor is our former vice president of the board. She left the board to run for state representative. So she's a special ed teacher, and she's now one of our state reps. The other state rep, Jane Garibay, is a former president of the Board of Education, and we're very close to her as well. So we're lucky in the latest redraw of the districts. We have two majority districts that Windsor has. We also, one of our state senators, Doug McCrory. So we're well connected in that regard, which helps. Not that Leonard and I, over the last few years, when I've been on the board, have always made an attempt not only to go to the legislative breakfast, but to make sure we sit down with all our representatives. Tammy Zawistowski didn't always agree with us, but always was willing to sit with us. I know John Kissel was going to try to make the legislative breakfast, but he let me know a day or two before that he wasn't going to make it, but he's interested in the information. Asked me about information that was going to be available to him, and I'm sure Leonard and I will try to sit with him. I wanted to, if Leonard, put Leonard on the spot, can talk about what he's doing. This is within a small group here. It's not official yet, but we are trying to have a unanimous support for House Bill 5003. And have our board all sign, hoping all 9 will sign on to a support for that. And obviously we would share it with the CABE. And I think it's important for other boards of education, when they do something similar, that we kind of siphon through CABE to know if there's, especially when it's bills that CABE or CREC or others support, we can be singing the same tune. So Leonard, I don't know if you want to say any more about your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. President. And yes, we're following the path of Ellington. Ellington, through their superintendent, and had their board file unanimous support for House Bill 5003, where all 9 members of their board actually signed on. We are of the belief that this is not a bipartisan situation. This should be a nonpartisan effort, as CABE is a nonpartisan organization. So I did bring this before my board, and the executive committee was very supportive of it. And yes, David, I just released a document for you and Mr. Panos to review as the executive committee. And I would like to release that to the Board of Education Friday in Dr. Hill's release, so that we can vote on at the meeting at next week. With that being said, we are encouraging board chairs to engage their boards to actually take a detailed look at House Bill 5003 to see how it truly impacts your district, as well as the supporting RESC in your area, and to see if it's beneficial to you, and to make sure that you reach out to your legislators in the CGA, both reps and senators, and to make sure that they articulate exactly the concerns that you may have within your area for that particular bill. For select few, it's not, it looks like on the surface, it doesn't help them, but we just got to make sure that you have the right information in front of you to make sure you know exactly how this bill impacts your respective town or city before you putting something like that in front of your board. So I would definitely recommend all you chairs to definitely consider putting that before your board and finding something to be unanimous on, and to get that up to the state legislator. Because at the end of the day, if stuff goes wrong with education, it's not the senators or the representatives that's held accountable. It's us as Board of Ed members that are being held accountable by the electorate, no matter what votes are being taken place at the CGA. So I would definitely encourage that.
Thanks for that, Leonard. And we will when this successfully passes the Windsor board next week, we will get that out certainly to the board chairs around the state. I'm going to go to Laurel and then to Jennifer. Okay.
Thanks. This actually, it's not really related to advocacy, but I wanted to backtrack just a second I have a question for John. That he mentioned, John, the net zero resolution in Branford. I think you mentioned it at our last meeting too, and I thought others might be interested. I'm curious to know more about whether that was your board that undertook the resolution, whether it was a town effort, what your process was. I'm curious how you went about that and how you got everybody on board.
Sure, thank you for that, Laurel. I sit on my town's clean energy ad hoc committee as well. And there's some incredibly qualified people and architects, some engineers, and people who are really committed to clean energy. I found that our schools represent 63% of the town's energy usage. And so for a town to actually get to a place where it's making a difference, we needed to be active partners in that process. So I crafted another district, Lyme, Old Lyme, or East Lyme, I believe it was, had a resolution, and I used some of their language and put together several whereases and a then now therefore. Really, it's to put a lens through which our operating staff consider typically capital purchases and other things. One of the most incredible pieces of data is the amount of hazardous particulate and gases that a simple 2-cycle gas-powered leaf blower spews into the environment. And so one of the things that we as a district, and now I believe as a town, are going to do, because it's so compelling, is eliminate this is very early in the process. We've just told people in a couple of presentations that, for example, California has banned them. And we're going to consider things like a gas power leaf blower buyback, along with the information about the hazards and the harms. We also include information about all electric landscape equipment vendors who actually provide clean equipment. So, some of the restrictions can be ordinances around time and place and how many get used in one place and how you want to phase that in. But it was fully supported by the board. It took a couple of meetings, which is fine. And it was the Clean Energy Committee in particular was very happy that we were able to get that done. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you be willing to share the language that you used for your resolution?
Absolutely, I will. Maybe I know it's going through a final edit after we passed it. So as soon as it's complete, I will share it with the group.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John. Jennifer.
Yes, I'm going to go back to 5003. In listening to the hearing, there seems to be some confusion on the quote unquote double counting issue. And I need it to be really, really clear from you or from all of us that remove the responsibility, or keep that and keep the responsibility. There's no lose it, but keep the responsibility, which seems to be some confusion. So either the magnets pick up the transportation entirely and the special education evaluations and the child find and the PPT organization and all of that, and it's not counted, or the sending districts are still getting a piece of this quote unquote pie in order to be responsible for those pieces. So don't know if there's just confusion with some legislators on why that is the case. But I think we need to be super strong in understanding that and in our advocacy around lose the money, lose the responsibility.
Absolutely, Jennifer. And I would have to say, I think the double counting phrase makes a good talking point for some. But even in addition to the things you mentioned, we all know that when the 71 students in Southington exercised choice, Southington, spread across grades K through 12, that Southington is not able to reduce their costs.
Of course.
So you still have to educate the students, the 23 students that are left in the first grade classroom, as opposed to the 25 students that you might have had previously.
And Patrice, we all
Yeah.
know the issue with October 1. Okay, I mean, there's no June reconciliation, right? Which there should be. So again, if that's going to be the case, there should be a annual requirement to stay where you go. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no coming back after the window. You know what I mean? Because it can't be this gray of yes, no. It's either yes or no. You know what I'm saying? Because if they're going to change that, which I don't know that they are, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Other advocacy comments?
Do we know about what's going on in the minds of the Ed Committee at this point around what they're going to be doing with the literacy piece? Is that going to be an extension of time or a change in the process or what?
We had assurances from Senator McCrory this morning that they are definitely going to address the issue, that they've heard the concerns. He urged patience. They are going to work it out. What that means remains to be seen. We are advocating for a pause for 1 year to allow this, whatever we're going to do, to be implemented successfully. So if there are districts that need to adopt a new reading program to meet, or programs to meet the needs of all their students, because what we know is that many districts use a combination of programs because that's what's most effective. The key part is having the professional development for the staff so that they are able to implement, and that takes time. That is not a 1 day in and out. Now you're great at supporting students in reading. So that's our hope, that there's the pause, because that really seems, with the number of waiver applications that have been submitted and the length of those waiver applications, I can tell you that one school district, their application is 600 pages long. They've submitted all their supporting data. They've got a lot of data to show, to validate the program that they've selected and are using, which is not on the state list. And so they're providing all their data.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Patrice, can I just add something? In
Sure, Brian.
my correspondence with CED and DE in my frustrations, my understanding is they're estimating each application will take 2 days to review. So my understanding also is about 90 school districts will be applying. So that comes out to 36 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, the math doesn't work.
No.
And quite frankly, one of the things that disturbs me the most is CSE says in their letter to me, we are in the process of obtaining reviewers.
Yeah.
What have they been doing? I mean, we're 12 days away from the due date. And I didn't ask this question yet, but once they get the applications in, are they going to release them all at once? Or is it as they get through them? Because I don't want to be the bottom of the list.
All right.
I just,
and they've also indicated that this will be an iterative process, that it won't be okay, we've reviewed your application and it's accepted or denied, that they will go back and forth with the district. And that is also a time-consuming, a legitimate but time-consuming endeavor.
Yeah, and just doing the math, I mean, a year is a year, but it's still 36 more weeks. It's just a lot of time, and I don't feel like CSD has moved fast enough or quickly enough for districts, and it's put a tremendous amount of stress, unneeded, in my opinion, on everybody.
The one comment that I will make is that the understaffing at SDE has also exacerbated their stress. I absolutely agree about the stress being imposed on districts, but as of late January, they had 114 staff members in an agency that is authorized for over 250. And
Yeah,
remember that this does not count the technical high schools, that those staff positions are no longer under SDE. So
Wow.
we're talking about professionals in the department and vacancies.
yeah, and I appreciate that, but I think we're all suffering the same thing.
Absolutely.
You know,
Back to advocacy, effective dates.
You don't think that it's reasonable for the legislature in June to pass a requirement that you have a policy in place on July 1st?
I mean,
Don't
I
you
don't
have an
know. I'm
expedited
just
policy?
saying.
I'm sure Jody can design an expedited policy process for you so that in 48 hours, you can have a new policy. Right, Jody? Not to put you on the spot.
So yeah, I've been trying to.
I'm
yeah,
on it right now.
Yeah.
I've been trying to educate at least our reps that your year one is our year zero.
Right.
Very simple concept to understand. That's our year zero. It doesn't count. The
Yeah.
first year doesn't count. You may put it in whatever you want, but if it's not going to be in the budget because our budget's already done. So just keep that in mind. You got to be at least a year, several years, depending on the item out for your effective dates.
Yeah. Agreed. And at least on some issues, they have been better about providing for implementation at least a year out. That is not uniformly the case, obviously. All right, shall we move to budgets? There's already been a little of that discussion, but how are you doing in the budget process? Are you able to gain support from your municipal officials for your budget needs? And I know you're not at the cliff in this budget cycle, but I know you're all thinking about when those federal funds end and what that's going to mean for programs in 2024. Comments, thoughts, success stories. Colleen?
Our budget passed 2 weeks ago. We passed, actually 1 week ago, we passed our budget. 7.11% increase. That's no new staff, no major projects, no improvements anywhere. And oh, by the way, we were using our non-lapsing account to bring the budget number down. And I still get asked, why did you add personnel? That is the thing that, Patrice, you heard me say when we were at our the breakfast this morning, the fact that our financial leaders here in town don't understand that if you bring in a special ed, rather than outsourcing for special ed, we've brought them in-house. We've added staff to offset the cost of the agencies that we were using. And then we get our hand slapped because we did that because we added bodies to the payroll.
Right.
And that seems to be, in at least in Southington, that's the major thing. It's as though you hire an employee and you have to justify it forever and ever. Amen. So it's been a very, very interesting year as far as trying to explain why inflation has hit everything, and we have contracts that we have to pay. And we've added nothing. And that's the frustrating part about it. We're just in place again for the second year in a row. So that's our story here. Now, our budget doesn't get approved by the town until May. So now I have to go and sell it to the financial bodies as well as our town council to say, don't cut our budget anymore, please.
Yeah.
So.
And I sometimes suspect that the pushback on increasing staff, and when you're doing that to bring students back into the district and you won't be paying those out of district placements, may not always be a lack of understanding, but more like another good talking point that you've increased staff and you shouldn't be doing that in this economy.
Well, for example, we added custodial help, 8 part-time custodial help for our high school, because we were having issues with custodial services doing the work. So we brought on 8 new employees, part-time, no benefits, no MERS, and we were criticized for that. And yet we said, we saved $38,000 in the process, folks, but they don't want to hear that. It's as though our employees are widgets. And if you add more widgets, it's very frustrating,
Yeah.
very frustrating. And I see everybody shaking their head going, yeah, it is.
Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, Colleen, we're at the Board of Ed passed a 5.2% increase. One thing we've found helpful in selling it over the past couple of years is to what you're talking about. We have a page we call efficiencies, because the financial geniuses in our town, they just want efficiencies. You never need to make a cut. You can just find these magical efficiencies. But we actually do in things like we've partnered with Effective School Solutions. It brings 2 clinicians into the district. And we've actually asked how many kids would be placed out if we didn't have this. And there's a number. And, you know, we put that in our budget, like we pay X amount for this and we save 4 placements, and that's a net of $400,000. And we just do that with everything in places we share services, and that helps them. And then the other thing we do that has been helpful is to do a chart of increasing special education enrollment with increasing staff enrollment, both certified and paras, and another chart that shows our, special education is mostly general education, but our non-special education students with their staff, and the lines really do track. So even though they see increases, they can see it tracks with the student population. And then we've been really careful. We've actually had, over the past 3 years, 265 new K-5 students, which translates to 13 sections. So we're really clear with our funding bodies what this money entails and how, K-5 enrollment is a step function with employment. It's just there's a policy on class size and we need to increase the number of sections. So stuff like that has gained a little bit of ease, but we'll see it this year at 5%. They're gonna squawk.
I like that idea of including the efficiencies in the budget. We have a separate document that we provide to them, but including it in the budget book, I think would be, it's kind of like right in your face. That's a great idea. Thank you, Lee.
Tina.
We just passed our budget. I mean, it's not the Board of Ed's budget. It's a 3.79. And for Richfield, it seems a slightly lower number, but we've adopted some of the things that were just shared. We talk about efficiencies. We were very lucky our insurance was flat this year, so that helped mitigate and keep our numbers really down. We're shifting to a different security model. So we have we have SROs and we have security. We have a subcontract with Securitas, and their costs were going up 33%. So we're trying to shift that, and we're getting 9 security SSOs, as we're calling them, and a director of security. But when you compare the cost, we're still coming down. So all this was shared in our budget. This year, the superintendent and our team did a great comparison, like all the costs that are being added and all the savings we're having. So we came to 3.79. And I want to say the insurance number really helped us. It's still being criticized, as you all have heard, it's still too high. There are still parents there's a group of parents who are upset about the efficiencies that were added about our teachers. We have 6 elementary, we have 4 art teachers, so they're being shared. And, the superintendent and the elementary principals stood strong because they wanted to talk about efficiencies. They can provide all the recommendations and provide equitable art to all 6 elementaries with the 4 teachers. So there was no FTEs added. In fact, our high school had a declining enrollment. So there's an adjustment of 1.5 FTE there. So there's a little shift here and there. They locked in a better price for fuel. This team has shifted. We don't own our buses. We contract with First Student. So this year they added 4 buses, which is helping in the special ed. They're trying to combine costs when there are some students that have to be, they go, for special ed services, whatever. So they're trying to combine those costs. So I think there are some efficiencies, and they've highlighted that in our budget. So compared to the other years, because we have come up with 6 and 7, and eventually we're always cut down. The Board of Finance has historically cut that budget down, which is really tough because then you got to go back and you got to re-examine. So we're hopeful that a 3.79 will go and nobody will touch it, because the rumor is that the Board of Selectmen might be higher this year, which is usually not the case. They haven't really presented a budget, but we're hopeful, fingers crossed. And just another point I wanted to share, what we've started doing is, because there were so many questions about special ed, so we do have, our budget book is divided into all the cost centers. That includes special ed. And what we started sharing with the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen is how special, there are some X amount of kids. These are IEPs, whatever, these are mandated by law. We have to provide for them. So if we have an uptake, let's say we have 100 students that have increased and they need all these services, these are services we have to provide. This is not adding. So we're not really doing general ed to special ed, but we're trying to separate it when we present to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. And also, when the superintendent and her team presented to the Board of Education, so that people can see the bigger picture, but also understand that sometimes the need to service all kids mean all, and special ed is not an option. Right. So I think that has helped us start building the story. We have a brand new team, Susie and her team are new. We have a new director of finance. So I think that's shifting. And of course, newer eyes, it's shifting the way we present budgets. So fingers crossed. We just adopted this Monday. We go to the Board of Selectmen in the first week of March, and then we go to the Board of Finance. And of course, we will have a referendum in May. Sorry, that was a lot, but just wanted to share.
Thanks for that, Tina.
Sure.
Who else wants to share? Ayan and then John.
Good morning. One of our many problems this year was our insurance went up about 32%. We have several students with some severe medical needs that have raised our rates. So one thing we have done is we have changed our insurance for our 5 unions to the state plan, which will save money, but it will still provide the same benefits. So we're in the process. We just voted for that officially on Monday night. Our budget right now, we haven't officially approved it, but it's down to, I think, around 4.5% with the increase with the one that was passed out Monday night. Unfortunately, we know that whatever percentage we present to our town finance board of 6 members will be cut, because their primary priority for decades in the town of Summers is they do not want a tax increase. Unfortunately, we have residents that do not understand the cost sharing formula, that it's based on a town's ability to pay, not on a town's willingness to pay. So this has been a battle since I was first on the Board of Ed in 1978. It hasn't changed. We've just changed the characters on the Board of Finance. So we're just hoping the interim superintendent that we've had this year has changed the budget format, which I won't go into, but the bottom line is it's made it more transparent and hopefully easier to understand and justify to the Board of Finance. So we still keep trying, but between the insurance, our special ed costs are up, and we've lost, I think, about $500,000 from the federal money, like everybody else, with the tutors that we added and the special ed needs that actually for the students in Summers increased during the year, not decreased. So we ended up adding more tutors. So unfortunately, we don't have the money to continue with a lot of those tutors. So I don't think we're much different from anybody else, but having one of the lowest mill rates in the state of Connecticut is is very important, unfortunately, to our 6-member finance board. So.
Thanks, Ann. John?
Thanks, Patrice. We passed our board's budget last night, 5.8 and change. That was a tremendous drop from where we started out. And that's actually not the end of this process, because on the opposite side of what Tina was talking to, our assurance went crazy. And so we are in the middle of some discussions with our unions to probably shave another 3% off of that number. And that'll bring us, well, it'll bring us around 3-ish, give or take. And we're optimistic that that will happen. So, you know, around 4, and it would be good if nobody really sort of used that number and connected it to Brantford yet. But I think this is a safe space. Not that there's connections to all of those people, but so those are sensitive discussions, and I think we're going to come out okay. And we have a very supportive Board of Finance and a very supportive chair of our RTM's Education Committee. And the RTM tends to also be very supportive. So we make it a point to thank them and keep them in the loop.
That's terrific. The news about a supportive RTM education chair and supportive Board of Finance, I think, is something that everyone would like the secret sauce to replicate that in their districts. Andrea and then Eric.
Eric was first. Have Eric go first.
Okay, Eric, sorry.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, Eric Bauman from East Lyme. So, real interesting. So we're having a lot of challenges. It's kind of the perfect storm. ESSER money going away, healthcare costs. We're in the state plan. We're predicting it's going to be probably 10 to 12% increase. This is our 3rd year in the state plan. We were self-insured in our healthcare prior. We're not a big enough town to be self-insured. We had really variable healthcare amounts. Went to the state plan. First year was 1.25. Last year we got surprised with a 10.5, I think, increase, and this year it's probably going to be 10 to 12. The prediction, their ability to predict the rates are not great. So just anyone who's in it, just be aware. They are not great. So we're being conservative. So we have ESSER money going away, healthcare costs up, inflation and utilities were mentioned are all going up. So we're in a tough situation. Our superintendent presented a budget and that was 6.97, which is extremely high for East Lyme. And it included 18.5 positions going away. We had 130 people plus at our meetings. That's in person, and then probably another 30 or 50 on Zoom with speaking out against that. And we have our public hearing the 27th, so in a couple of weeks. But I think the Board of Ed is going to end up increasing the amount that the superintendent and what he provided. So we're in a really weird situation right now. I feel for the Board of Finance because we're kind of putting on them what's going to be a pretty big number. I don't know how, I don't know what they're going to, I'm not sure where it's going to go. I have a feeling we've had a lot of late nights. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot more late nights in working together. The one question I had or point is on healthcare. At our last meeting, we talked, I think it was the last one, we talked a little bit about healthcare, and I heard very variable rates in people's increases. Someone mentioned, I think, 0, which is unbelievable. I heard a lot of 3s and 4s. I now have heard, I can't remember what the number was, but it was a pretty high number, crazy. I know ours, we're talking about 12%. Is there, it seems like it's something that, as we talk about, the first topic is of this meeting, like there seems like there's got to be something we can do to influence. I don't know. I thought the state plan was a good idea. right? You get an N large enough, it spreads the increases across a big group. Hopefully you know, level out. So anyway, I don't know. We did talk about that. There's some consortiums that we're going to look into as well in East Lyme, not for this year, but for, you know, next year, the year after, and start looking, is there a better way to do this? But I don't know that we're going to stay in the state plan if it continues to go the way it is. So we have a lot of challenges, but healthcare is one that I think we need to kind of get our hands around a little better.
Yeah, good point. And I think your experience is shared by many. It's certainly shared by CABE in terms of health insurance. It seems that the first year or two in any new plan looks pretty good for you. And then after that, the rate increases cause you to look elsewhere. Andrea and then Brian.
Thank you. Pardon my voice. There's a reason I can log in today. I'm not at work because of the laryngitis, but we're still in workshops right now with our budget. The superintendent has presented us with a 3.9% increase, which is pretty reasonable historically with what we've been given. So I'm hoping that the board can pass that along. Our main concern is that our district has an MBR exemption. So we're worried not just about not getting the 3.9%, but about not getting anything, or in fact, you know, getting less than. So as we move forward in the process, that's sort of always in the back of our minds. And we're just really concerned about, you know, what's going to come down the road, because as many of you have mentioned, you know, I think our town is very focused on not raising the mill rate and not necessarily the quality of our educational system. So it's a challenge.
Thanks for that. And I hope you get your voice back. Brian.
Yeah, so just numbers like everybody else has. We haven't passed our budget yet. We have a public hearing tomorrow night. While I'm in this meeting, our local newspaper was nice enough to make sure they published an article, so I get to enjoy the feedback the rest of the day. But we're at 5.95% currently, and then 9% for health coverage. One of the things we do in our budget, which I'm sure other people do, we have budget drivers and cost savers. We have 2 pages and they're side by side. And that's been helpful. The cost savers never are higher than the budget drivers. And one of the things we're experiencing, which is I think pretty unique to New London, Learn has closed the kindergarten section of a local school. So we found out in December, we're getting an additional approximately 70 kids, which is a tough challenge. In addition, you know, we were working through the process, and then you get 70 more kids in your district to find teachers and paras and staff and everybody else in desks, for that matter, has been a challenge. One of the things we also do is we meet with the council, maybe from November till now. Doesn't always help, but at least they can understand our struggles. And then we also meet with the mayor and the finance director from the city. So a lot of the other comments are really familiar, but we try to at least make them aware of our challenges, and they do the same for us. And a lot of them are similar, obviously. You know, we're both struggling with energy, we're both struggling with healthcare, but we also struggle with no one wants to increase the budget. But just some challenges from New London, and I appreciate everybody else's comments, because you don't feel as alone as you normally do.
That's one reason we keep bringing you together. If there's anything the pandemic brought us, it was the ability to share those common concerns and not feel so lonely in the work that you're doing. And I think the point about keeping lines of communication open with your municipal officials, even when you know it may not yield the results that you hope it would, you've got to keep working at that, because you don't ever want to say, gee, if only we had tried to explain, maybe they would have recognized the need for these increases. Other comments? David.
Thank you. Probably pretty similar to most others. Our superintendent recommended a 4.84 increase. but he first talked about what would it take to roll over our budget, which was 6.22%. And we have not, our process in Windsor is the board first has to pass the budget. It then goes to the town council, and then it goes to a referendum. We had very few people participate in any kind of budget forums that we had. One person who did say it was very surprised that we got it under inflation because we're also a district that has been over the last, except for maybe the COVID period, has been slightly increasing the number of students, and many of them are from coming back from magnet schools. But we have some of the same drivers that everybody else has talked about, insurance being a big one. Special ed, our business manager is very good throughout the year, been telling us about some extra costs that we've had. So none on the board really should have been surprised when we saw a big number, because it's only a slight increase to the reality of what we're facing this year. The same as others have said, we've looked towards efficiencies. We show cuts in some staff, so we have increasing enrollment and we're cutting staff. My guess is that the budget, though Leonard's working hard behind the scenes, we're hoping to get a unanimous support for the superintendent's budget, but we don't know that. We also have the benefit, unlike from what some people have said, we have a very positive relationship with our town council. We have 3 members on the town council that were board members, 2 from one party, 1 from another party, as well as another person who's an educator. And so they know the process. They know things that we can't control, like special ed costs. And so we're optimistic, guardedly optimistic that it will go through the town council well. It is an election year, though. So being an election year for us every 2 years, as many others are going through, it could end up being a political football. We're hoping that's not the case. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Patrice, can I ask David a quick question on one of his
Sure.
comments?
Go ahead, Brian.
David, you had said, we're a magnet school district in New London, that you're having a lot of kids coming back from magnet schools into your district. Is that what you had said?
Well, we're not experiencing what you're experiencing, a big jump like that in 1 year. But over the last, other than COVID period, we had been seeing increases, and most of it is not additional families moving in. Most of it has been, we see the numbers coming back from, for us, our CREC magnet schools, which is the RESC around our area here, coming back. And so that's been a little bit of a savings to us, actually, of not having to pay for those students in CREC.
Okay, yeah, we suffer the flip side of that.
Yeah.
So there's challenges from both sides. So
Yeah,
thank you.
we've invested in Windsor trying to be a comprehensive high school to win a lot of those students back. And it's been well over 5 or 6 years since we started that investment, and it's really starting to bear fruit now.
Okay, thank you.
So I think on that optimistic note, we will bring this call to closure. It's been a pleasure to talk to all of you. I know that staff has been taking a lot of notes, and we promise not to identify any individual districts in anytime we share out information with legislators, but it's important for them to know that budget increases are in this range, and we do get those questions. So on behalf of the CABE board and staff, we thank you and we wish you good success in your budget and advocacy work. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.